You're here. Hi.
I love how they look and I love how they feel. They are a diva of the tile work.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint, definitely.
Kitchen island or a breakfast bar?
Hi,
Hello.
am I on?
You're here. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, all good, thank you. Just we're in the new rented house at the moment in Guernsey, so kind of lots going on with unboxing and moving things around and trying to make the house a home, really.
Yeah, so you're busy.
Yeah, very. Yeah, no, very. But it's all good, and I've got a few things that we're working on from a content perspective to try to show what you can, or the beauty really of actually having a rental home, of how you can make subtle changes without actually having to cost a fortune, but also without having to hardwire into walls or make expensive changes. So I'm kind of figuring out some things at the moment that I hope to share in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's a really nice project. And what about your new home? How's it coming along?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so the house, the main house on Place 48 was the one that we'd renovated over the last few years, and we're renting that one out whilst we've moved to Guernsey, because my partner's got a new job essentially. So we moved here about a month ago now into this rented, and then the property that we renovated in Derby, which is what I'm known for on Place 48, that's got some tenants in that property there. So we've retained it, we've not sold it, we've just simply rented it out whilst we've moved here.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Katie. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Not a problem. And so, Katie, just to get us started, you are an illustrator and content creator. Do you want to tell us maybe a little bit more about you and about your work and about the services that you offer as well?
For sure. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so essentially we bought our house, the one that people know us for on Place 48, about 5 years ago now. We lived in it for a couple of years before doing anything with it. It had outline planning permission, not full planning permission, but outline planning permission to extend. We weren't necessarily keen on the plans, but we liked the area, and we knew that eventually we would come on to do an extension or some kind of a renovation, because it was in a good area with good access to schools, etc. And it wasn't until we had our daughter that the house, we knew that we needed to have a bigger house. And so we took the outline planning permission that we had, and we went to see 2 or 3 different architects, 3 it was, and basically said, look, we know that it's got outline permission, but what we want to change that to a certain design that we'd had in mind. And we went to see these 3, and one of them came back with a design that kind of blew us away and went above what our initial brief was. In terms of kind of the interior side of things, that was all done by myself and with Paul. The architects just simply came up with how the house would actually look when finished and help us put together the builder and the tradespeople. But in terms of the actual interior design, that we did that ourselves. It wasn't, I'm not a formally trained interior designer in the sense that I haven't got a degree in it, but I have done a number of courses, about 6 in total over the last I think 3 years it is now. So all ranging from kind of a mood boarding to basics of how to decorate, finding your sense of style, SketchUp. So I'm a SketchUp Pro, qualified now as well. So I've taken all of those things that I've learned over the last 3 years and was able to actually put them into our project. And then Place 48 kind of came about as that particular house.
Yeah,
if that helps answer the question.
And then you now offer the service to clients as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we were doing the house, it wasn't sort of my idea at the time to offer the mood boarding on all those workshops that I'd done was really for myself. It was just something that I really loved and was really passionate about. And it wasn't really until we had the Instagram showing the project, that people would send me messages and direct messages saying, oh, we really love this room, or we really love your sense of style of what you've done here. And I genuinely had so many people coming to me that I said, well, actually, I'm quite prepared to offer an e-design service to run alongside my day job, if you like. And I probably work on anywhere between 2 to 4 projects in a month, depending on whether it's just a single room or multiple rooms in a house, or even a whole house design. So it was never my intention to do that. That has just kind of naturally come about, that I do offer that service now. And I actually would say I dropped what was my full-time job. I've actually dropped that down to working part-time so that I can then concentrate on e-design, and eventually it would be nice to leave my full-time job to do that permanently. That's my ambition anyway.
Oh my God, amazing. Well, it's definitely heading in the right direction. Glad that's so that takes us to the theme of today's renovations. So we would love to get your advice. Obviously, Place 48 is amazing, so I think it would be very helpful for all of our followers, and we always get asked tips and tricks, so it'd be great to have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So so to understand how you first came about taking this renovation project, had you set out to buy a fixer-upper house, or like was that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, we had an idea of the kind of house, I suppose a dream house, if you like, a forever home. We definitely got the kind of the style that we've ended up with in mind. But in all honesty, to have afforded that house, the kind of house that we wanted outright, we just generally couldn't afford to do it. And so before we even had found our own home, we'd been living in rented accommodation for about 3 years. We hadn't gone on holidays, just like the odd weekend away. We hadn't really bought lots of new things, lots of clothes, etc. We had saved for a long time. It kind of felt like forever at the time, and kind of sacrificed those things to be able to have a deposit and a decent amount. So we had deliberately looked for a doer-upper. And in the area that we kind of narrowed it down to, we knew, wanting to have children, what kind of specific area we were looking for, ideally without a huge commute. But we did look for over 2 years, until eventually we'd gone to a local park and I'd seen this house, and it looked abandoned. And that sounds like a really, like, there was nothing wrong with it from the outside. It just, there was no curtains at the window, no lights were on it. It just looked abandoned. So I kind of took a sneaky peek like this through the window. So the neighbours must have thought I was a bit loopy. And there was, through the front door, there was like a load of discarded mail. And I was like, no one's living there. So I put like Rightmove alerts on, and nothing happened for months and months and months. So I thought, oh, I was maybe wrong. But then it came up. And I was like, right. And literally the minute that it came up, I was ringing the estate agent, getting a viewing at the house. And the same day we viewed it, we put an offer in.
Okay, you just
literally the same day, the house that we'd seen like 6 months before, it had come up, and we put an offer in for it. And because it wasn't necessarily that we were cash rich, it was just that we were living in a rental, and therefore we had been saving up for a number of years, that we were able to put in an offer, and it was accepted. But it was definitely a fixer-upper. And it came with this outline planning permission, as mentioned. And so we knew, looking at other houses in that area that were larger, we knew that we would be able to get a return on our investment and be able to achieve the kind of home with the plots that we wanted to get. But we just would not have been able to afford that house off plan if we hadn't have done a renovation and an extension.
Yeah, which is, it's amazing. And what attracted you to that style of home in particular? Like, whenever you seen the house, whenever you just create a blank space and just kind of want to design that from scratch? Because the house is completely different now than whenever you moved in.
It is. And I suppose the actual house itself and the plot that it sits in, we really like. There's like a tall yew tree hedge which goes around the side, so it's quite kind of concealed, or the garden is quite sealed, so it's not overlooked at all, and we really like that about it. And it's a 1930s build. And just looking at the house initially, it had a really good feeling about it. And inside, it just felt really warm and welcoming. And actually, although we have extended and we have kind of changed the decor, the actually old part of the house internally, the old bones, like the old rooms, actually haven't changed. So the size of the what was our original bedroom that we had as our room, that hasn't changed whatsoever. The spare room hasn't changed. The original bathroom, bar knocking a window out, hasn't changed. So we didn't do an awful lot with the existing house from a bones perspective. We simply added to it. But what I don't necessarily like is when you try to make an old house and the new part look like it isn't an extension. I don't like that. I wanted to own that the new part was a new part. I didn't want to say, oh, it's all blended together. I wanted to, that's okay to own that it's new. But what we did try to do was choose materials that kind of blended in with the local area. So for example, like the Siberian larch that we chose, that was a deliberate choice. We didn't go for a render. We wanted to go for the larch because we're next door to a park. It's a nod to the trees and the environment. It's really weathered and silvered really nicely. And so there is a juxtaposition between the old and the new, and that was a deliberate choice. I didn't want it to be that we were trying to blend it in. I want to own the new part of the house.
Yeah, and it's stunning. And even from the exterior alone, it's completely different house. And was that your design, or was that a combination of yourself and the architect that you work with, or how did you come up with that exterior plan?
Yeah, so the architect, when the one that we ended up choosing, he just kind of got me and Paul and the kind of, I wouldn't call it necessarily lifestyle, but he understood what we were trying to achieve, almost like a London look, which, you know, we lived in Derby in Derbyshire, and it was actually quite difficult to try to find an architect that had done something quite modern. Like, it really was a bit of a challenge back, you know, going back 3 years ago. There wasn't a huge amount of architects that had done those type of projects, and so this one had this, what I would call at the time, like the London look. He understood what we were trying to achieve, and he added real value above and beyond just doing as a design. Like, it was his idea to take the cladding and clad over the windows, which did create a bit of additional work for the builder, because it meant when the new part of the house was built, it meant setting the windows further back than would be a standard setting in a frame, in order for the cladding to go over the window. But that was a detail that when he presented it to us, we loved it from the start, and it was not something that we would have thought to have done.
Yeah.
And so things like that added real value to us. And then in addition to that, thinking about tying the exterior in with the interior, the architect also had suggested to drop what was our existing lounge window, which was kind of short window. He said to drop it so that it would make it really long, but it would really frame the view out to the garden and help draw the outside in. And things like that, myself and Paul, not being trained in architecture, wouldn't have really thought to have done. And those are things that when I look at the house, are things that I really love, and I'm glad that we paid that additional money to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the roof as well, like, you got a whole remodel of the roof, and it ties in so well with the new build as well. But yeah, in terms of you have mentioned earlier that there was an outstanding permit on the house already for an extension. And did you have an issue with that, or like how did you find getting the planning permission then?
So the outline planning permission was for a single story, so it was to extend what was the current kitchen. But when we bought the house, so it said 3 bedrooms. It's funny, when we were looking back through the actual original plans from the house back in the 1930s, it actually classed it as a 2.5 bed house, not 3. And the 3rd bedroom really was a 0.5. It didn't even fit in a single bed. It was where we had our daughter's cot. So you could literally fit in a cot and a set of drawers, and that was the kind of the third bedroom. So the outline planning permission, whilst was great, and we knew therefore that we had the footprint, but we also knew that we needed to be able to have an extra, at least to make it a proper third bedroom, and ideally a fourth bedroom, which was what led us to change the attic into this fourth bedroom. There was also no downstairs toilet in the house. There was no kind of ensuite or anything like that. So we basically took the outline permission to the architect and said, well, we know that we need to probably put a double height extension on. And what that meant was knocking down our existing garage, because the foundations weren't strong enough to build above it. So it meant knocking down the existing garage to rebuild it and put another bedroom on the top to extend this sort of third bedroom, create us an additional bedroom for our son, and then also 2 en-suites. So that was what we went back into planning for. But because they'd already got this original kind of outline planning, it wasn't too difficult to kind of go back and make some revisions to that.
Okay.
What was rejected was a roof terrace that we had put in for, and the reason that we put in for the roof terrace was because by extending and having a kitchen extension, it meant that we lost garden at the back. Now, it wasn't garden that we are necessarily sorry to miss, because the way that the sun comes round, we didn't really get sun in that particular part of the garden past 11 o'clock, but it was still outdoor usable space. So the architect said, where the flat roof was, why not just take the roof slightly higher, but actually create this kind of outdoor terrace. But unfortunately, the neighbours did heavily object. And although we thought about kind of going to appeal, at the end of the day, we also wanted to be on good terms with the neighbours, and knowing quite how they felt about it, we just decided to not pursue it. So it's a bit of a shame, because it's a bit of a wasted space, but also, you know, we can live without it. So
yeah, absolutely. And then, so before anyone starts knocking down walls and applying for planning permission, what advice do you give someone who wants to start a renovation?
So the architect that we worked with, he had put us in touch with 3 different builders to give us quotes, and although they weren't wildly different, the builder that we went with gave us like a subject of work. So he literally broke down everything that was going to happen from all of the surveys, from first fix to second fix, and he could give us kind of an outline of how long things would take, when certain tradespeople would need to kind of come in, and a budget. And that really kind of helped us to understand how long this project was going to take. So from a budget perspective, because he kind of worked with these tradespeople that he'd recommended, we actually weren't that far off. When we finished our project, we weren't way over. We were probably about 15% over where we wanted to be. But he'd said from the outset, you probably need to have a contingency. So we always knew that. And where we'd actually gone over was really daft things. Like, for example, we'd been quoted for 15 skips. We needed 22 skips. And we hadn't accounted for 7 additional skips and grab loads. And also things like we needed to have our electric meter moved and our water meter moved. That meant going to the local authorities, and it was around £1,000 each time we needed to have one of these meters moved. So that was an additional £2,000 that we didn't quite anticipate that it would have been those costs. So there were definite overruns, but in the main, it wasn't too far from what the builders had kind of given us at the start, but that was because they'd been very detailed in giving us this subject and schedule of works, which really helped us understand what was going to happen when. And I would definitely recommend for people going through similar to really look at that. And ultimately, it has to be financially viable. If you're going to be developing or renovating in an area, look at what those other houses have sold for, and are they of a similar size and kind of detail of what you're trying to achieve. And if you can go on Zoopla or Rightmove and look to see what they've sold for, you're probably going to get an idea of, is the cost benefit going to make the outcome. Now, we weren't doing ours to flip it or make a profit, but at the end of the day, we still didn't want to be in negative equity. So it was really important that we stayed within a certain budget throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely very important to get quotes and to really see who's going to be your best fit. And what advice would you have for those people who are trying to be very budget friendly and also stay within a project timeline? Because timelines can vary a lot. So what would your advice be there?
For sure. And I think a lot of that sometimes comes down to the tradespeople. So wherever possible, and I know it's not easy, especially if like right now with the last few years of being in lockdown, and tradespeople are so busy. And I know that from being in Guernsey and trying to actually get hold of tradespeople, it's really difficult from a supply and demand perspective. But wherever possible, if the tradespeople could give fixed costs as opposed to day rates. We didn't manage that one on every single one of the tradespeople, but the plasterers, for example, they did give us a fixed cost. So wherever possible, try to get that, because day rates can vary enormously. So try to get quotes, but if you can get them to tell you it's going to be a week and get that fixed, I would say that's definitely something to help. Also, if you do have the skills, or you know people that can come in to help, like a lot of the paint work we did ourselves, a lot of the paneling we ended up doing ourselves and watching tutorials. Things again, like for example, when we were doing the garden, some really great hacks is we used roof lats to do our fencing. The fencing that we'd seen was a thousands of pounds for like a very similar, like a slim slatted fence, and it just took us way over budget when we were doing the landscaping. So we used roof lats, and honestly we saved thousands. And then when we bought the plants,
so looking from there, really,
yeah, exactly. And then what we did with the roof lats, another person on Instagram, KJG Home, had seen that she'd used like an oil on the roof lats, like it's called instant grey from HSO, and we rubbed that, which I did myself over a weekend. I rubbed it on the roof lats to make it look like Siberian larch. And it's genius stuff, like £12 a bottle, but honestly, when you compare it to the larch on our house, it is almost identical bar the actual texture of the wood, and it's a really great way of saving money. And then a little hack as well is we took the leftover roof lats that were just sort of lying around that would have just gone off to the skip. When we had our plants delivered, there were these like big black pots, and I was like, they could be like really made to look spectacular if we could put some of these roof lats and attach them on the side of these kind of plant tubs. So that's what we did. We had them kind of cut to size. Our joiner was on site anyway, so can you just cut them to size, which he did. And then we basically stuck them on with no nails onto the side of the planters. And I was genuinely getting offers on Instagram for about £200 for these planters.
Oh my God.
You can save money by doing things that yourself. You really can. It's just if you can watch some tutorials, even if you don't think you're particularly DIY friendly, you'd be surprised at what you can do.
Yeah, how much you can figure out. So money, basically, they came in very handy for you. They worked a lot.
Yeah, they did. They definitely did, and we saved money. And another thing on the outside or the exterior was that we didn't quite have enough tiles to be able to do the side of the house, and we couldn't really afford to buy another load of tiles. So with the tiles, we had around 20 left. We actually cut them into thirds. So it was like a 90 centimetre length tile. And I said, well, why don't we just use like cut them up into thirds, like 30 centimetres each, and lay them as stepping stones and put chippings in between. So that's what we did, and that's why the side of the house is kind of laid out as it was, because we couldn't afford more tiles, so we just cut up the tiles that we had and laid them in stepping stones.
Yeah, and it worked out perfectly. Like, it couldn't have worked out. So yeah, it wins all round.
Exactly.
Okay, so our next question is, right, Often the electrical plan is an afterthought. How important do you think it is to have a lighting plan in place before all the work? And yeah, so do you think that's important? And is that something that you did?
Yeah, 100%. So when the builders first came round, they looked at the existing electrics that we had, and it's fair to say they were dodgy at best. I don't think anything had been rewired since the house was built in 1935. So yes, 100%. And because when we were renovating, we had to strip off the old plaster and we had it all replastered. We had the electrics done at the same time. But what we did do with the electrician was looked at kind of future proofing it. So when he quoted us for the electrics, he quoted us for things like speakers. So although we haven't got speakers in the roof, we've got the electrics ready to have the speakers in should we want to go back and have them done. He also did us the whole outdoor plan as well. So when we were having the house built and the garden landscaped, we actually had all of the cabling laid at the same time we were having the build done, so that we didn't have to come back retrospectively. And I think it is really important. You need, it's not always easy to know where you're going to be having plug points and light points, but he was really good at kind of guiding us through. When you're laid in bed, you want to make it easy to turn lights on and off. You want to make it easy to plug your phone in. And he was really good at going through like the detailing and things as well, like not having spotlights everywhere, having a really nice range of mood lights for certain rooms, up lights, down lights. And I hadn't really overly thought about that before, but he was very experienced. And I do think an electrician that has done a number of builds, to sit down and go through that at the start of the build was extremely important to us. And I'm really proud actually of the detail that we put into the lighting, and there really isn't an awful lot that I would change from that perspective. I really wouldn't.
That's amazing. So yeah, it's definitely essential to be organised, have that plan before you start work, before you start knocking down any walls.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I am a big believer in kind of buy cheap, buy twice. And so I think it is really important to buy quality fixtures and fittings. And I would go without other things to make sure that we had nice light fittings, because I do think that the quality adds to the room. I think if anything, I would prefer to have a cheaper sofa than to have cheap looking lighting. I think it really just adds that additional, makes it feel a lot more authentic and bespoke as well.
Yeah, it creates the mood, sets the atmosphere. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And Katy, each room in your house has its own unique style. What inspired you to create all these different designs and to create the home that you have today?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I personally, I do like open plan in the sense that the rental we're in at the moment is like super open plan. But at the same time, I do like a room to feel like a room and feel relaxed when you're in it. So when I design spaces, I design them with how I want to feel first. It isn't actually about the objects. It's about how I want to feel when I'm in that particular space. So the first thing I kind of do is think about what's the function of that room, who's going to be using, how are we going to move around in it, and then I go from there. And I always start with a mood board. And I think a lot of people think a mood board again is about objects, but it isn't. It's about how you're wanting to feel, and how you then layer things up. So certain colours will make you maybe feel happier or make you feel more energized in a room, more relaxed. And so for every room in the house, I built mood boards, and I would constantly go back to them throughout the whole build process, put things on, remove things off until I was happy with it. And so I think what we have done, or what we've created, is rooms within the house that they're not pretentious, they feel very relaxed. Not every single item in the house is new. It really isn't. A lot of it has been curated over years of us collecting things with our previous houses that represent us. So it's actually very few items were new. A lot were what we've taken from previous homes and bought things from charity shops or from antique markets or from antique shops, from eBay, and we've curated those pieces together and it just feels very relaxed.
Very personal.
Very personal, yeah. And as I say, I am a fan of open plan, but I also prefer rooms to feel like rooms. And if you know, when you go into our lounge, you can hunker down, you can feel relaxed, you can kick off your shoes. It doesn't have to look perfect. Nothing is pristine. You know, we've got 2 kids that are running around with their hands everywhere. I want to create that home where you want to be there, and you want to feel like it's a usable space.
Yeah, amazing. Well, you've done an amazing job at creating that. And in terms of the renovation, if you could go back and if you could change something or give yourself a piece of advice, what would that be?
I will answer honestly on this, and I'll probably get some challenging questions on it. But whilst I love encaustic tiles, I love how they look and I love how they feel. They are a diva of the tile world. I have to say it, they are. And I don't think that was necessarily pointed out to us, or we hadn't necessarily done as much due diligence on them. And so for heavy duty areas, for example, our hallway or bathrooms, I can't say hand on heart that I would use encaustic tiles again. I would probably go for a porcelain, which are much easier to maintain, to keep clean, and are just a lot more practical for when you have families. So I don't like overly promote encaustic tiles in areas that are, like I say, high traffic, and that was definitely a learning curve on our part. It wouldn't necessarily put me off using them again, so maybe in like a tiled area, for example, or in a kitchen, not necessarily a splashback, but I would use them again. I just think in areas that are heavy from a foot flow perspective, that's definitely been a learn from us, and we did use them heavily in the house. So from that perspective, and I also think maybe going with your gut feel on things. So originally, and what I mean by that is originally in the hallway, we had wanted to continue the flooring in the lounge throughout the hall and up the stairs, but it's a Douglas fir, which is a softwood, and it can dent quite easily. So again, a bit more high maintenance. But the carpenter put us off from doing it and said it wouldn't be easily done. And so kind of relatively last minute, we switched the design from using that wood to painting the stairs and going with those encaustic tiles. And in hindsight, I wish that I'd stayed with my gut instinct and pushed through for the original design. And I didn't. And through experience, next time, I would just go with my gut.
Yeah, because it's what you love, it's what you like, what you wanted. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so what would be your top 3 tips for someone who is brand new and just starting out and wanting to renovate and, like yourself, get a fixer-upper?
Yeah, I would definitely go in with both eyes open, and I think as much research as you could possibly done, especially when it comes to the builder, and getting a good builder that's either can recommend tradespeople or has their own tradespeople, because when one job starts, you ideally want a next one to start. And I know it's not always that seamless, but wherever possible, to try to go without huge delays in projects. So I think definitely doing the research on the builder and the tradespeople is for me the number one, because I ended up building a really good relationship, especially with our joiner, who I could just draw him a very quick drawing and he could articulate that and kind of go away and make it happen. So I think that's really important. Trying to again establish some kind of a schedule of work to get an idea of realistically how long things are going to take. We ended up, we moved out for a 12-month period, which was extra cost, but at the same time, we were having the boiler taken out completely. We had no heating, no kitchen. So it would have been nigh on physically impossible to have lived in our particular renovation. If you can live in it and have a kind of a trailer van or something on site, great, because that's a cost saving, but that just wasn't unfortunately possible for us to do. So that schedule of work really helped us to understand how long we would be living outside of the property and what extra costs we would need to factor in. And then from a budget perspective, it's always those unseen things. Like for us, instead of 15 skips, it was 22, and at 300 quid a skip, that was extra budget that we hadn't kind of counted for. So we had to make different choices with certain materials and certain finishes throughout the house. We didn't get everything that we wanted. And unfortunately that is just what happened. So I think looking at a contingency, 10 to 15% is where we ended up being. And then the last thing which I would say is that when the plasterers come, we had wanted all these beautiful like paints throughout the house, but the reality is that the plaster takes a long time to dry and settle out. And so if you can have it mist coated first by the painter, just in a kind of a standard off the shelf Dulux paint, wait a good 3 to 6 months until it's fully dried out before going over it in a really quality paint, because there's areas in our house that we had to repaint because I didn't understand this process of the drying out. So we ended up spending a bit more money than we would have liked to have done.
Okay, so be patient. There would nearly be the final point.
Be patient. It's hard, especially if you're a bit like me. But yeah, definitely try to be patient because you don't want to end up paying twice.
Yes, absolutely. I just see, so someone has asked in a question here, how the renovation process worked in the UK. You need all changes in plan approved, and you need to do it at the same time.
No, so the outline planning permission, or planning permission as a whole, is generally in the UK. It's valid for, I think it's 3 years as we speak right now, and so there you've got a window of time to go ahead and make those changes. That could mean that after 2 years, 7 months, that you decide to go into planning and ask for either an extension or to slightly change it, then you can. But yes, you do have a period of time which, if you don't get back those plans done by that period of time, then you would have to go back into planning permission, submit a new set of plans. But the between us purchasing the house with that outline and then going ahead, we were well within that 3 years. Let me just double check the question. Do you need to do it all at the same time? No, you don't need to do it all at the same time. The reason that we did was because it just made financial sense to kind of go all in. And because we lived in rented for about 2 or 3 years before we ended up buying our house, we had saved up a decent amount of money. We ended up having to borrow from the bank to finish the build off, but not like overly. So we had planned and budgeted in all of that time. So we just decided to get it all done. But you can do them in phases. I would start with the rooms that are going to add at least the most value to the property. So if that's your kitchen, for example, or a new bathroom, I would probably start there. And you can definitely do it in a phased approach. But my best advice for that would be to speak to the builder to see what they recommend doing. Yeah,
each property is different as well. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering our questions, Katy. We have a quick fire round here.
Sure.
A few questions.
Of course.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Paint or wallpaper?
Paint, definitely.
Kitchen island or a breakfast bar?
Island.
Hardwood or laminate flooring?
Hardwood.
Chinese or an Indian takeaway?
Oh, Chinese.
City or country living?
Country.
Open plan or closed living space?
Closed living.
Brown hues or blue hues or brown hues?
Brown hues.
Fine. Brass or glass lighting?
Brass.
And sweet or savoury?
Savoury.
Yeah, nice. Very good. Well, Katy, thank you so much for joining us again. It was so good to talk to you, and thank you so much for all of your advice.
No, not at all. You're welcome. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope that was somewhat helpful for you all.
Oh my God, it was great. Thank you. So what have you got planned now for the rest of the evening?
To be honest, we've still got quite a lot of boxes that need to be going through, and then trying to get hold of some tradespeople locally. So any shout outs for Guernsey, let me know. I'm always on the lookout.
Sounds like a busy evening.
It is, yeah, no, definitely. But I'm looking forward to it. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think from what I've understood from the people that follow me, is that there's a lot of content for people that are renting. They want to see how they can still make a rental property feel like their own. So it's going to be a challenge, but I've definitely got some ideas up my sleeve.
Oh, great. Well, we're definitely very excited to say that. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.